a full pantry can feel like safety. But in 2026, a full pantry is not the same thing as a smart pantry. And that difference matters more than ever because grocery prices have made ordinary shopping feel less forgiving. Most people are not trying to build some extreme emergency plan. They are trying to stop the leak. They want a few foods that actually protect the budget, reduce waste, and keep them from making expensive last-minute trips when the fridge is empty and the week is already too busy. So if that is where you are, let me take one weight off your shoulders right now. This is not about panic buying. It is not about hoarding shelves full of things you will never cook. It is about building a small, useful buffer with foods your household will actually eat. Because the most expensive pantry is not the one that looks empty. It is the one filled with food nobody uses. In this video, I am going to show you the pantry staples that actually earn their place, the ones that quietly waste money, and the simple rules that make shelf-stable food useful instead of just comforting clutter. And there is a very simple test behind every item on this list. Does it store well, get used often, and fit your household? If the answer is yes, it deserves space. If the answer is no, it is probably just taking up room and tying up cash. Keep that idea in mind, because it makes everything else much easier. Start with the first rule. Shelf life only matters if the food is actually eaten. People get trapped by the idea of buying long-lasting food, but if that food never gets opened, never gets rotated, and never becomes a meal, then it is not protection. It is frozen money. The second rule matters just as much. Storage space is as important as the sticker price. A cheap item is not a deal if it spills, goes stale, gets forgotten, or forces you to reorganize your kitchen every week. The best pantry foods are the ones you can store simply and reach for easily. And the third rule is the one that saves the most regret. Buy for meals you already cook, not for fantasy emergencies. If your household already uses rice, pasta, oats, beans, canned tomatoes, tuna, or peanut butter, then those are real tools. If a food only sounds useful because it feels like preparedness, that is a different thing entirely. Now let's build the pantry the practical way. Rice belongs on the list for one basic reason. It stretches meals without much effort. It works with beans, vegetables, eggs, canned meats, soup, leftovers, and sauces. It is one of those foods that can quietly reduce the pressure to order takeout when the fridge looks thin. But rice is only a smart buy if your household actually eats it. If you know how to cook it well, if you already serve it, and if it fits your kitchen, then it is a strong budget anchor. If it sits in the back of the cupboard because nobody wants it, then it is not saving you anything. Oats are another pantry staple that deserve respect. They are cheap, filling, and useful in more than one way. Breakfast is the obvious use, but oats can also work in snacks, baking, or as a stretch ingredient in a household that likes simple food. They protect the budget because they make it easier to start the day at home instead of paying convenience store prices for something fast and expensive. And that brings up an important pattern. Many pantry staples save money not because they are glamorous, but because they interrupt a more expensive habit. Dried beans belong in that same category. They are one of the strongest examples of low-cost, high-value food. They can become soup, chili, rice bowls, salads, spreads, and side dishes. They keep well, they are versatile, and they can dramatically lower the cost of a meal when you know how to use them. If dried beans feel intimidating, that is fine. Buy what your household will actually cook. Canned beans are a good backup for convenience, and they still give you the same basic budget protection, just with less prep time. Pasta is another pantry anchor because it is easy to combine with many different ingredients. A box of pasta becomes more than a box of pasta when you pair it with canned tomatoes, garlic, onions, frozen vegetables, canned tuna, or a little cheese. It creates a meal foundation fast, which is exactly what protects people from the expensive temptation of grabbing dinner from a drive-thru when everyone is tired. And then there are canned tomatoes. This is one of those pantry items that does a lot more than people realize. Sauce, soup, stew, chili, braises, and quick skillet meals all get easier when you have tomatoes on hand. They are one of the best examples of a low-cost base ingredient that helps turn other items into actual dinner. If you want a pantry that truly protects you, it should not just contain food. It should contain meal builders. That is why canned tomatoes matter so much. They help you turn plain staples into meals that feel complete. Now let's move into proteins and the items that stretch a budget even further. Canned tuna is one of the most practical shelf-stable proteins for many households. It is fast, familiar, and easy to work into sandwiches, salads, pasta, rice bowls, and casseroles. A can of tuna can reduce the chance that a simple lunch turns into a delivery order or an overpriced deli run. But this is where good shopping habits matter. Look at sodium, look at portion size, and make sure you actually like the product you are buying. Some canned proteins are only useful if your household will eat them without a fight. The best pantry protein is not the one with the most marketing. It is the one that gets used. Canned chicken can serve a similar role. It is not fancy, but it is flexible. It can become a sandwich filling, a quick soup ingredient, a pasta add-in, or a simple rice bowl. For households trying to keep meals moving with less friction, that matters. Peanut butter is one of the strongest money protection foods in the pantry because it does several jobs at once. It can be breakfast, snack, lunch, or a backup protein when everything else feels thin. It is especially useful in homes where mornings get rushed and everyone starts reaching for convenience food. A peanut butter sandwich may not sound exciting, but it is exactly the kind of simple, low-waste food that keeps daily spending under control. When it is there, it prevents a lot of unnecessary purchases. When it is missing, people tend to pay more for less. Shelf-stable milk, or long-life milk depending on where you shop, can also be useful if your household actually uses it. It helps with cereal, coffee, baking, and quick breakfasts. It is not meant to replace fresh dairy for everyone, but it can be a smart backup that prevents waste when the regular milk goes bad before it is finished. Lentils deserve a special mention because they hit that rare combination of affordable, fast, and practical. They cook faster than many dried beans and can be used in soups, stews, curries, and simple bowl meals. If you want pantry foods that do real work without a lot of fuss, lentils are often a strong choice. At this point, you may be noticing the same pattern repeating. The best pantry foods are not just cheap. They are useful in multiple meals. They help other ingredients go further. And they reduce the odds of wasting money on food that gets forgotten. That is the real test. Now let's talk about the foods that protect breakfast and snacks, because this is where a lot of households quietly lose money. Breakfast is one of the easiest places for inflation pressure to sneak in. Cereal, bars, bakery items, coffee shop runs, drive-through sandwiches, and convenience store stops all add up quickly. A smart pantry helps by making the simple breakfast available at home. Oats are already in that category, but so is cereal when it is bought carefully. Not every box is a good deal. Some are mostly air and advertising. The trick is to watch the unit price, compare package sizes, and buy it when it is actually on sale, not when the shelf label just looks familiar. Crackers can also be useful, especially if they are paired with peanut butter, cheese, tuna, soup, or canned spreads. They are not the star of the pantry, but they can make other foods easier to eat and stretch leftovers into something more satisfying. Fruit cups can be worth keeping if they genuinely get used in your house. They can help reduce the temptation to buy more expensive grab-and-go snacks. But this is another place where discipline matters. If fruit cups sit around for months and nobody touches them, they are not helping your budget. They are just taking up space. A snack food only earns its place if it actually prevents a more expensive purchase. That is why some families do very well keeping a few dependable snack options in the pantry. Not a mountain of snacks. Just enough to stop the emergency convenience store stop that somehow costs $12 and still does not satisfy anyone. Let's pause for a second and reset the whole idea, because this is the part people need to hear clearly. A useful pantry item is cheap enough, versatile enough, and rotated often enough. If it is cheap but nobody eats it, it fails. If it is versatile but too expensive for the amount you get, it fails. If it is perfectly reasonable but gets forgotten until it expires, it fails. The goal is not a room full of reserves. The goal is a small buffer that protects your money and reduces waste. And that is where real control starts to show up. Now let's talk about the items people buy out of fear, but rarely use well. This is where the consumer trap gets a little more subtle. A lot of products are sold as emergency foods, prepper foods, survival foods, or miracle shelf-stable solutions. Some of them may have a place, but many households buy them because they feel responsible in the moment, then discover they do not fit the way anyone actually eats. That is how waste begins. Specialty emergency meals are a good example. If you have never tested them, never checked whether your household likes them, and never built meals around them, they can become expensive shelf clutter. They may store well, but storage alone is not enough. If the food is hard to use, the odds of wasting money go up fast. This is also true for novelty grains, unusual mixes, or products bought because they appeared in a dramatic online video. If you do not already cook with them, they may be more fantasy than function. The same warning applies to overbuying specialty sauces, seasoning packets, or trendy shelf-stable items just because they look like preparedness. A pantry should reflect your real household. It should not become a museum of good intentions. And here is another quiet mistake. People sometimes buy the wrong version of a product because it looks like a bargain. Then they never finish it. A larger container is not always the better buy if it cannot be stored well, if it loses quality before you use it, or if your family simply does not go through that much of it. That is why the old phrase "buy it cheap and buy a lot" can be dangerous when it is applied without thinking. Cheap and unused is still wasted money. If you want to protect your budget, compare the shelf food to the foods you already cook. Ask yourself whether it replaces a more expensive meal, supports a regular meal, or prevents a last-minute shopping trip. If it does none of those things, let it stay on the shelf. Now let's make this practical for the next grocery run. Start with the meals you actually cook in a normal week, not the meals you imagine cooking in some perfect future. The real ones. Then build around those meals with shelf-stable basics that support them. If you make pasta night, buy pasta and canned tomatoes. If you make breakfast at home, buy oats or cereal that your household will finish. If you make sandwiches for lunch, keep peanut butter, canned tuna, or shelf-stable protein options that are actually eaten. If you make soups or rice bowls, keep beans, lentils, rice, and a few simple flavor builders. That is how pantry shopping becomes less random. Then check unit price, not just sticker price. A smaller package can look cheaper until you compare what you're actually getting. Shelf labels matter here. The price per ounce, pound, or serving tells a much better story than the bold number on the front of the package. This matters even more in 2026, when package sizes can shift quietly while the shelf price stays close enough to fool the eye. Sometimes the price looks unchanged, but the amount inside has changed. That is one of the most common ways shoppers lose money without realizing it. So slow down for a moment. Read the label. Compare the sizes. Let the numbers do the talking. And before you buy anything new, check what is already in your pantry. That sounds simple, but it is one of the strongest ways to protect your budget. A lot of people buy another box of something because they think they are out, only to find two more already sitting at home. That is not preparation. That is accidental duplication. The pantry review does not need to be complicated. Look for the staples that are used most. See what is running low. Check expiration or best-by dates. Then note what actually gets rotated and what keeps getting ignored. That small habit can save more money than a pile of impulse buys. Now let's talk about the final group of pantry foods that can be useful, but only if you use them with discipline. Canned soup can be a helpful backup, especially on days when cooking from scratch is not realistic. It is not always the cheapest option per serving, and some versions are very high in sodium, but it can still protect the household from a more expensive meal out. Think of it as a convenience tool, not a main strategy. Pasta sauce can also be useful, but only if it fits your routine. If you already make pasta often, it can save time and reduce waste. If not, it may just sit there until you feel guilty about it. Canned vegetables are another mixed bag. They are not the flashiest pantry item, but they can round out meals when fresh produce is expensive or when you need a backup. Just watch the sodium and choose versions your household will actually eat. Bouillon or stock concentrates can be helpful too. A small amount can turn rice, beans, noodles, or vegetables into something more complete. Again, the goal is not to collect ingredients. It is to build flexible meal support. And that is the bigger lesson here. Pantry foods are not all equal, and they are not all meant to do the same job. Some foods anchor breakfast, some stretch dinner, some protect lunch, some prevent waste, some give you a backup when the week gets chaotic. The smartest pantry is a working system, not a pile of products. So here is the calm action list for your next grocery trip. First, review what you already have before you leave the house. Do not shop blind. Second, choose 3 high-use staples that your household already eats. For many people, that might be rice, oats, and beans. For others, it might be pasta, peanut butter, and canned tomatoes. The exact items do not matter as much as the match. Third, add 1 backup item that reduces the chance of expensive convenience spending. That could be canned tuna, shelf-stable milk, lentils, crackers, or canned soup, depending on your routines. Fourth, buy 1 extra of the right item instead of 5 of the wrong one. That simple change keeps the pantry useful and prevents clutter from growing faster than the budget can support. Fifth, rotate what you buy. Put the older items in front. Use what is already open before opening a new one. That is how shelf-stable food stays useful, instead of disappearing into the back of a cabinet. If you do those 5 things, you are not stockpiling. You are protecting your money. And that is the real pattern running through all 20 of these staples. The winners are the foods that fit your real meals, store safely, and get used before they become waste. The losers are the foods that look smart in theory but never make it into dinner, breakfast, or lunch. That is why a pantry can either calm a household or quietly drain it. So the next time you stand in the store aisle and feel the pressure to just grab whatever seems cheap, stop and ask the better question. Will this food actually reduce stress later, or will it become another item I have to manage, store, and remember? That one question can save a lot of money. And if you want the simplest possible takeaway, keep this in mind. A smart pantry is not about fear. It is about control. It is about making the next grocery trip less vulnerable to price pressure, less likely to create waste, and less likely to force you into expensive last-minute choices. That is how real household resilience starts. Take one look at your pantry tonight. Find the 3 staples you use most. Notice the 1 item you keep buying but rarely finish. Then make your next shopping list from that reality, not from a fantasy of perfect preparedness. That is how you build a pantry that actually saves money in 2026. If this helped you see your grocery habits more clearly, stay with us. There are a lot more hidden budget leaks hiding in plain sight, and once you know where to look, they get much easier to control.